Welcome to our very first unit of Lincoln 300, unit number 1. And with each unit, there's always going to be an overview from the professor, which will lay out the topic, historical context for the topic under consideration. Now, the topic for this very first unit is one of the 3 founding documents, or charters, of the United States that you will find prominently on display if you ever visit the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And that document, that Charter of Freedom that we're going to be discussing for Unit 1, is a Declaration of Independence. Now, it is commonly believed that the Declaration signaled the severance, or final break, of the original 13 American colonies from Great Britain on July 4th, 1776. In fact, that is not true. After nearly 160 years as one of Great Britain's principal colonies enriching the British Empire, relations between the mother country and its American colonists quickly deteriorated in the 1760s once the British Parliament began passing new taxes and increasing older taxes to help pay off its debt after years of costly imperial wars with especially its principal enemies, France and Spain. Moreover, new punitive laws were passed to quell the protest of American colonists who became radicalized by this new direction in British policy during the 1760s. There was talk of independence among the most radical of American colonists throughout the mid and late 1760s and into the early 1770s, but there was no consensus across all 13 colonies. In fact, most colonists outside the New England colonies feared a complete break with England and doubted that they could manage independently, let alone defeat the world's most powerful empire in war. Even after the war broke out, the American Revolution, in April 1775, the majority of American colonists were still not in favor of independence. Delegates representing each colony assembled in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and formed a Continental Congress. The majority of the delegates argued for not independence, but rather reconciliation with Great Britain. They called on Parliament and the British King, George III, to simply roll back their taxes and oppressive laws. But by the summer of 1776, a full year into the American Revolutionary War, events had caused the majority of colonial Americans to shift in favor of independence. Despite being at war with the most powerful empire in the world, the war had gone surprisingly well for the Americans. That is, the British never really committed themselves to waging a full-scale war in North America. They kept the bulk of their military might in Europe for defensive purposes, and other key elements of their military were dispatched around the world to maintain their global empire. Now, with the confidence of success on the battlefield for the Americans, a most influential pamphlet began to circulate around the American colonies in January 1776. That is Thomas Paine's Common Sense. It was a simple essay, 56 pages long in its publication form, and it was a psychological turning point in the push for independence, as Thomas Paine argued that the Americans had it in their power to create the world anew, that they had it in their power to become the most freest people in the world. He called on Americans to remove their shackles that bounded them to the mother country, bounded them both physically, but more importantly, psychologically. Paine asked Americans, why would they submit to be ruled by a king, an empire based on a monarchy that itself was based on nothing but one family's line that determined who could and who could not rule? Moreover, Paine asked Americans why they would be ruled by a small island, when in fact their 13 colonies was much larger geographically than England itself. By the late spring, early summer of 1776, the delegates of the Continental Congress in Philadelphia began discussing independence. And on July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress took a vote and voted in favor of independence. July the 2nd, 1776 was in fact America's Day of Independence, and many of our founding fathers believed that if their experiment in building an independent republic could succeed, that is, that they would defeat the British and step out onto the world stage successfully as their own independent republic, then all Americans going forth would celebrate July 2nd as their Day of Independence. But alas, Americans do not in fact celebrate July 2nd, the date in 1776 in which Congress actually voted for independence and thus severed its relationship with Great Britain. Rather, Americans celebrate July 4th, and they look to a piece of parchment, a paper document, as the final nail in the coffin for colonial America's ties to Great Britain. For all but a few Americans, that is, those who know the full history behind the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration signals the break with Great Britain. Moreover, most Americans point to the document and its revolutionary language that bestowed independence on Americans, defining what it meant to be American. Most people who know a little bit about the Declaration and its language of all men are created equal may well know that the primary author of the Declaration of Independence was none other than Thomas Jefferson. Within the document, Thomas Jefferson declared the quote-unquote self-evident truths that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Americans have interpreted these words found within this founding document in various ways over the generations, and have used Jefferson's words to define what it means to be an American citizen. It is true that Jefferson gets the lion's share of the credit for the document and its preamble that encapsulates the founding independent principles of what it means to be an American. But Jefferson was not, in fact, its sole author. There was a committee of 5 delegates charged with drafting up a statement of independence to go along with the Congress's July 2nd vote, its resolution of independence. Now, besides Thomas Jefferson, the other 4 authors included most significantly John Adams of Massachusetts, who will become our 2nd president of the United States, our first vice president under George Washington. Also included Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania. Most people know him for his many inventions, as well as 2 other gentlemen who are lesser known, Roger Sherman of Connecticut and Robert Livingston of New York. Now, I've listed the other authors and the colony that they came from to show you that when they drafted up this committee, they wanted delegates that represented the various colonies, the New England colonies, the middle or mid-Atlantic colonies, and the southern colonies. So much focus is given to Jefferson's preamble that few even focus on the rest of the document. In fact, when Congress called on the committee to draft up a formal statement of independence to go along with the July 2nd vote for independence, many looked to the bulk of the document as the real red meat of the document. You see, if you move beyond what is Jefferson's preamble, the flowing language with all its flair, you will find that the document is, in fact, the bulk of it is a list of grievances. You see, the Congress intended the Declaration to be addressed to the British King, King George III. And they wanted to list the reasons why they were breaking their ties with Great Britain. They wanted to be clear as to why they had been driven to the point that they were forced to declare their own independence. That is, after being treated as, what they would say, second-class citizens of the British Empire. Of course, their main grievances had to do with oppressive taxes and laws passed by Parliament without granting them representation. But they also charged the mother country for the conflict with Native Americans. And even in the very first draft of the Declaration, there was a grievance included blaming Great Britain for bringing slavery to the Americas. That grievance, however, was quickly deleted from the final draft at the suggestion of the Congress's Southern delegates, who were very sensitive to any mention of the institution of slavery. Now, the grievances were in fact the real red meat, the significance of the document for Revolutionary-era Americans, those that were living at the time. And as such, the Declaration of Independence was written for a specific moment in time and written with a singular purpose during the American Revolutionary War to explain, through the grievances, why they were severing their ties with Great Britain. However, the Declaration of Independence was, and remains, a revolutionary document that Americans then and now continue to celebrate and cherish. The Declaration's revolutionary language, its self-evident truth that all men are created equal, that language that constitutes the preamble, has echoed or reverberated throughout the American colonies and since states, and touched those who have lived here ever since. The ways in which the interpretation of the Declaration of Independence revolutionary preamble has changed over time is the central focus of this first learning unit of Lincoln 300. In fact, our university's namesake, Abraham Lincoln, is a key part of this assignment. How Abraham Lincoln, some 77 years ago, after the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, managed to redefine its foundational language of all men are created equal, to expand its meaning to include not just white men, but also black men, many of whom were still enslaved both prior to and during the American Civil War, is a key part of this unit. Moreover, another key part of this unit is how the Declaration of Independence has resonated with Americans as well as citizens of the world ever since 1776 to this modern day. Once you complete this unit, and you will see this always in each unit, the sort of objectives that you will have learned, you should be able to describe the contents of the Declaration of Independence, explain how the Declaration of Independence became the foundation of Abraham Lincoln's political philosophy in the 1850s and 1860s, and how he used the principles and ideas that the Founding Fathers espoused in the Declaration to become the centerpiece of his political language. You should be able to understand the Declaration's global impact and consider how that impact continues to influence global views of the United States to this day. You should be able to identify in ways which the Declaration contributes to modern ideas of American identity. With each unit, there will be readings. And for this unit, there will be 4 readings, primarily. First, we'd like you to read the Declaration of Independence itself. I've given you the historical context. You should be able to read and understand its 2 parts. There's a preamble with Jefferson's flowing language, his self-evident truths, and then there's the list of grievances. As you read it, think historically, given the context of the document, but also think about those delegates who voted for independence and then signed their names to that document. By signing their names, they became known leaders in a rebellion against the most powerful empire in world history up to that time, Great Britain. And by committing their names to ink on the document, they had committed treason against the mother country. If their experiment in American independence failed in the war, then they would be in great danger. Thus, by signing their names, they risked their livelihoods and their lives. Think about the document today. What does it mean to us today? It was a document signed in 1776 that severed our ties from Great Britain, really made successful by victory in the war. But what does it mean in a 21st century context? Does it still hold meaning for us as Americans today? The next two pieces in your readings are Lincoln focused: the Gettysburg Address and an article on Lincoln and the Declaration. These are going to, well, first the Gettysburg Address is going to cover how Lincoln reshaped the Declaration. When he says 7 years ago in 1863, 4, that's 80, and 7 plus 7, 87 years. You subtract that from 1863, it takes you back to 1776. He is reshaping the Founding Fathers' language that all men are created equal. And by doing so, he's incorporating all men, white and now black. Because when the Declaration of Independence was written, and they said all men are created equal, well, that really meant white men, and it really meant rich white guys. Over time, Americans would expand that to mean all white men in the early 1800s as a new party of Jacksonian Democrats led by Andrew Jackson and his Democratic Party opened up the ballot, the right to vote to all white men, adult men over the age of 21, which is what adult meant at that time. By 1860s, Lincoln incorporates that to be all men, white or black. I want you to read the Gettysburg Address and then read the article. The article covers how the document played into Lincoln's political rhetoric and how it came to shape his political philosophy, and how Lincoln's words shaped the way we as Americans continue to this day to view the Declaration. Finally, the last two pieces are putting the Declaration in a global context. You will read a piece from Harvard professor David Armitage, who will place the Declaration in a global perspective. His main point is to argue that no other American document in our history has had such a global impact as the Declaration of Independence. There is a video at the end of Armitage where he basically is laying out his main points, which is in the article as well, which comes from a much larger book, and you can view this as well. But you can get the gist of it in the article alone. So after you complete this list of readings, then you're going to take part in the discussion. This is the assignment. This is the meat of the weekly unit. You'll see that there are 3 questions for you to consider, to answer. In your assignment, you only have to answer one of the 3 questions. Each unit, there will be 3 questions. You only have to answer one. First one involves the Declaration of Independence and Lincoln. Well, you get that from reading the Declaration and the 2 pieces on Lincoln, and you can answer that. Number 2, what was the global impact of the Declaration of Independence? Well, you can get that from reading the Declaration, understanding it, my historical context, and then the pieces on David Armitage. Number 3, think about the way it contributes to modern ideas of American identity. That's sort of a combination of most of the pieces that you can read and your thoughts. In answering, you only have to answer one question. You don't have to answer 2 or all 3. And when you make your post, you need to go up to the top and click on Create Thread. And in the subject title, I'd like you to put the question and the number you're answering to make it clear. Answering question 1, question 2, question 3. If you want to put a title in there, you can. But I'd like you to mark which question number you're answering, 1, 2, or 3, so it's very clear. And then start writing your response. When you're done, click Submit. There is some formats when you're doing your discussion, as laid out in the introductory pieces. Well, make sure you write at least 2 paragraphs, and a paragraph is at a minimum 3 to 5 sentences. You need to make your discussion post answering one of the 3 questions. Always do no later than Thursday of that week at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. Post must be in by Thursday night, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. Once you're done making your post, you'll need to respond or reply to 2 other students who post. These will always be due on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone of that week. All these units run from Monday to Sunday. And in the replies, you need to be at least 1 minimum paragraph. I ask that in making your replies, one of the replies can be to the same question you answered, but the other reply must be to another question, and that is to help broaden the discussion. Once you have answered at least one question and made 2 replies, you're finished for the week. And again, I will be grading usually within the week from the Sunday when the unit ends.